Good morning to everyone. Minister Cuerpo, Commissioner Serafin, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with you today in the company of so many distinguished thinkers and experts. Jacques Delors famously said that no one falls in love with a single market. And at the beginning of my first mandate, I thought that must also be true for our budget. But I must say in these years, I've learned that our budget is much more than a set of funds, programs, and rules. Because I've seen how it transforms lives and livelihoods. It brought flooded farmlands back to life. It helped save millions of jobs at the height of the pandemic. And it enabled a small startup to develop the revolutionary vaccine that saved millions of people from COVID. And this is the life-changing power of our budget. It is the engine that turns our priorities into action, and it is the backbone of our union. In the last 5 years, I must say we have constantly tested the limits of what our budget could achieve. I remember the long meetings with our services every time an emergency hit. And every time we managed to find creative ways to mobilize our financial firepower for the people and for the business of Europe. For example, during the sharp economic downturns in the pandemic, with the shutdowns, we raised money for our member states with Next Generation EU. We turned a safety buffer in the budget, the famous headroom, into a very powerful emergency tool to finance our recovery and our energy security. I would not want to dare to think about how it would have been without Next Generation EU. We used all the built-in flexibilities to respond to emergencies. If you think of the floods in Italy, the earthquake in Croatia, but also Putin's full-scale invasion and the energy blackmail we went through. So, over the past 5 years, time and again, our budget has punched above its weight. And we must also see now, today, that we have reached the limits of what is possible. Our current budget was designed for a world which no longer exists. It was the world of 2020. And think of 2020 and today. Today, geopolitical tensions are rising. We see the trade rules that are being rewritten. We see extreme weather events more and more frequent due to climate change. We see the change in technology that is faster than ever. So the new normal is anything but normal. And I'd like to set out some of the lessons we've learned from the current budget and the principles that should drive now our new budget. So let's have a look at what we learned and at the principles we want to apply. First, flexibility. Let me start with the need for a more flexible, agile, and responsive MFF. Today, you all know it, 90% of the budget is pre-allocated from the start. In other words, today we are working with a budget designed in the years 2019 and 2020. I started in 2019. Under this budget, we have worked with flexibilities worth less than 4% of the MFF. This is far too small and far too fragmented, because we simply do not know what we will be facing next. For example, think about the new technologies like artificial intelligence. When the current budget was negotiated, I remember we thought, and this was the norm of The declarations that artificial intelligence would only approach human reasoning round about 2050. Now, we expect this to happen already next year. So it is simply impossible to determine today where innovation will lead us by the end of the next budgetary cycle. Our budget of tomorrow will need to respond fast. Think about natural disasters like storms, floodings, and heat waves, droughts. No one can predict when or where the next one will hit. The only thing we know is that they will be more frequent due to climate change. So it is our responsibility to prepare better and help those who are affected by them. In one word, the next budget must be less rigid. It must balance long-term investment with the capacity to adapt to new realities in a smooth way. And it must also be able to act like, on the other hand, an emergency strike force when disasters hit. So the next budget must deliver where it matters. It must deliver fast, it must deliver efficiently, and it must deliver with impact. My second point, we need greater coherence in funding our priorities. Today, we dilute our spending power across too many instruments. And we do not coordinate enough between the European level, the national and the regional level, the private sector, the other institutions. We need much greater focus on what matters most. This is actually a key recommendation of the Draghi report. And this is also a key lesson that we learned during the last mandate. Our union is most effective, of course, when we all push in the same direction, all the different levels. With a strong steer, of course, at European level, with simplified access to European fund and coordinated action on the ground. This is, if it functions and if it's delivered like that, the unique added value of a continental budget. We have also learned that local authorities must be deeply involved in designing reforms and investments. Because every territory has its own specific needs. Some need to invest more in education and skills. Others need to invest in the energy grid. Some need to do more to manage their water. Others need to manage their external borders. So every territory has a unique set of circumstances and of course knows best how to address them, what is necessary. So we need to listen to our regions instead of having one single recipe for all, one size for all. For this reason, the new budget will be built on a new structure. It will be centered on national and regional partnerships for investments and reforms. These partnerships will be shaped by European priorities. And let me be very clear. In our next budget, there will be a central place for cohesion policy and for the common agricultural policy. Modernized and better adapted to today's challenges. But one thing is very clear, our regions and our farmers will always be at the heart of our union. This new approach will also help deliver a more effective and efficient budget. Now, how it is today? Today it takes years for our investments really to reach the ground. Years. This means we're not funding the priorities of today, but those of several years ago. In other words, the new budget has to be faster, focusing not just on how much is spent, but what is delivered for our citizens and businesses. We will draw on the recent experience with milestones and targets. Each tranche of funding will be dispersed when agreed objectives have been achieved. Because we all know, and that's the experience of the last years, that this is the strongest incentive you can set to get things done. In everything we do, we will keep to a very clear principle. Respecting the rule of law is a must for the European funds. It is non-negotiable. And it is the core of our European way of life. And this leads me to my third point. The next budget must be simple. Simple to understand, simple to use for people, for businesses, for public administrations alike. You all know the reality of today. Today, many of our companies simply don't bother to apply for European funds because it is too complex, too slow, and too costly. They complain about bewildering numbers of programs. They struggle with too much bureaucracy, too little support, too many interlocutors. For example, listening to the startups, I've heard them telling me that they decided not to apply to our financing because round about 20% of the final grant would have been spent on the application process. That cannot be. So we urgently need to standardize our products and have a single gateway. This is why the next budget will have one single European competitiveness fund with simpler rules and transparent procedures. It will pull together investment power at the EU level in strategic sectors, from artificial intelligence to space, from clean technologies to biotechnologies, from all the other topics that are so important for our competitiveness for the benefit of the entire single market. So the Competitiveness Fund will be operating under one rule book, offering one single gateway to project promoters, from small, medium, or bigger companies to researchers or university, you name it. It will be offering a whole box of financial tools to catalyze the private investment that we need so much and the public investment. In other words, the Competitiveness Fund will offer support for the whole investment journey of a project. So from the idea, where it starts, to the market, from research to startup, to scale up and global manufacturing. But let me also be very clear. Our framework program, Horizon Europe, will stay as a self-standing program. It is an outstanding brand. It is the most renowned research program worldwide. Of course, it will be tightly connected to our Competitiveness Fund, because we all know that we need a seamless flow. We need a seamless flow from fundamental research to applied research to startups, and then to have the scale-up. Finally, we need new sources of funding. We must finance new priorities, and we must start repaying the loans raised for Next Generation EU. It is absolutely clear that national budget alone cannot bear the brunt of it. So we need new own resources. We have already proposed a package that is on the table today. We are also working on additional proposals. Of course, I'm aware it will be a very difficult discussion, as there is no silver bullet for this question. But I must also say the budget equation is daunting. So it is high time that we find a solution. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout our history, our budget has been a true force for good. It has helped unleash an economic miracle in our youngest member states. It has created a new generation of Europeans through the Erasmus project. Unprecedented experiences. Horizon Europe, as I said, has been financing groundbreaking research. Horizon Europe has won, or the Horizon program, has won 33 Nobel Prizes over the last 40 years. We want this success to continue. And for this, our budget must keep pace with a changing world. This is the mission ahead of us. I want to thank all of you for being here and discussing this mission the next 2 days. Thanks a lot. Have a good conference, and long live Europe.